I was listening to a recent interview of yours where you were talking about that finance wasn't even necessarily the initial target for you. It kind of was an opportunity that emerged that you then took advantage of. What was the target? Like, what did you think you were going to do?
Oh, I was for sure going to be in my mind, I was for sure going to be in of um uh some form of government. Like I was studying political science, but I was interning for, in the House of Commons in the UK. I was interning in upstate New York at the in New York, they had their own state government, and
Mhm.
working for a lobbyist and for state senators. And I was for sure like some form of either international relations or some form of politics. I loved, studying, parliamentary studies and different kinds of government studies. And I figured, I could do this lobbyist thing. I could do this, and if all failed, I could go back to law school. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I was 100% pretty sure that I was going into some form of, I don't know, some form of government.
Interesting. So, do you have any like pet projects where you're involved in government on the side, or like
No,
did that just completely detach?
it detached. I got
Interesting.
bit by a bug in uh, I got bit by a bug in when I got out of school, and in the world of finance, it was kind of like, I just got bit, mostly because of the trading floor, I would say. But I think once I stepped foot kind of in the world of trading, I just couldn't look nowhere else was interesting to me, and and then when I stepped foot on the trading floor, the whole thing just came. It was apparent. It was clear. I
Hmm.
That's where I needed to be. I didn't know I was going to get there, but that's where I needed to be.
Interesting. So, when you realized that you're going down finance, did you have kind of some sort of big roadmap? And just so you understand, the preamble that I'm kind of starting to get into is you talk a lot about decision cycles. So, I'm
Yeah,
kind of like peeking into the way you think about decisions, balancing two different things, having some sort of plan and a roadmap, but also taking advantage of opportunities. Going back to
yeah.
the
Well,
original part of this.
when you're a
Oh,
little
go ahead.
younger, I was a little younger. I was a little. I've always been kind of impulsive, but I
Hmm.
don't think I had this. I don't think I had a grand. I don't think I had this blueprint or this roadmap all laid out in my early 20s. But I think that, like I said, as soon as I got to the trading floor, I knew that there was something special about that environment, between open outcry and just pure speculation, uh, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, nonstop action. I mean, you can't do anything else. It was like a giant
Hmm.
locker room. I love the giant locker room, situation. And it was kind of an extension of like, childhood sports and all that kind of stuff. And I I couldn't imagine at that point doing anything else. I had to survive. Like I was freaking I'm gonna fucking survive this thing if it kills me, but I'm gonna survive this business. And I did, luckily.
Was like when you were first starting out on the floor. A lot of times people think that it's automatic money. If you get to see, then you just go in there and you make buckets of money and it's all gravy. But, the people I've spent a while, reading because I've never had that direct experience, but I'd love to hear from you what it was like when you first started.
Um, it was incredibly intimidating at first because everybody, like, nobody wants you there. Like, you can imagine, imagine there's a big pot of money, and if there's 1,000 people, right, then they split it 1,000 ways. But if there's 1,001 people, persons, they have to split it 1,001 ways. So every time you add people to the equation, everybody hates you. So uh, I always love to tell the story of my first day ever on the floor, and I didn't really know what to expect. I was just really excited about being in Chicago and being on the trading floor, and all these little pits all over the place, and people were screaming and yelling, and I had to pick a spot to trade. So I walked up to this pit. It was a National Semiconductor, which no longer exists, and the symbol was MSN at the time. This is like the early 80s. And there was only like 5 or 6 guys in the pit, maybe 7 guys. And I stood there for a while. And nobody will talk to you or look at you or anything. They just scowl at you. And this one guy, this one kid, he was a clerk, and he was kind of nice kid. And he said, "Hey, what's your name?" I shook his hand. He was a clerk though, I wasn't a trader. And I said where I was from. So it's from White Plains, New York. And he goes, "Oh, me and my brother," and his brother was a trader. He was clerking for his brother because he was too young to trade. And because my brother, we used to live in White Plains. And so he goes, this is my brother David. And so I go, "Hey David," and I put my hand out to shake his hand. He goes, "Fuck you." And it was right at that moment I realized, okay, this is my first interaction with anybody on that floor. And it was at that moment when I realized, okay, this is how the game is played. Now, for me personally, I was pretty thick skin. I'm pretty thick. And I was like, okay, this does not bother me. This actually intrigues me. Because I just didn't really understand how vicious and violent everything was. And then at that point I realized, okay, this is how we're going to play the game. And I really have to, I have a lot to learn.